Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's a special year-end edition of the France 24 debate. We're looking at the car of tomorrow. We were wondering what you put in the tank or how you plug it in part one. Now we're going to look at who's behind the wheel or who's not behind the wheel. We're doing so in the company of Michael Taney, Managing Director of Delphi Electronic Controls Europe. Welcome back. Welcome back as well to Verena Butt-Despous, Head of Corporate Communications for the ride-sharing service BlaBlaCar. I was going to say the French ride-sharing service, but it's not. It's
We like to hope we're global.
Gone global. Thierry Hans, CEO and founder of a French startup called YokoGo that connects your car to the cloud. And we're going to see why that's important in just 1 minute. And Nicolas Meillon, energy consultant with Frost & Sullivan. It was September. Uber started testing driverless cars in Pittsburgh. Now, French-based auto supplier Valeo ran a test back in September on that horror of horrors known as the Boulevard Périphérique, the Paris Ring Road. All right, they got through the day without an accident. Nicolas Meillon, would you get in a driverless car?
I have to admit I have a hard time being driven by somebody else, so being driven by a machine might be even harder. But I think it's still, I would if I was invited though. I'm once again on the invited in this kind of cars.
Hint's been dropped, go ahead.
The question is always what for? Why do we do this kind of cars? And you know, when we talk about autonomous cars, still there is the long distance and then there is the city. Driving long distance, it happened to me a couple of times, let's say that I was driving after a nice meal or after the end of the week and I would kind of fall asleep. And I would definitely love to be able to do a little nap and to have the car driving for me. And this is going to happen. This is where the first autonomous car are going to happen. It's on high-speed closed road, and there's a clear benefits for cars, but also for trucks, because this is where you have the biggest accident. And the good news is when people are killed on the road, it's not in the city, it's on the road. So this would make a lot of sense. In the city, I'm a bit more skeptical for the simple reason that I came to this debate today with my autonomous car. I was not driving it. I could check my emails. I could have a little nap, drink the water. There was somebody driving it.
It's called a taxi.
It's called a taxi,
yeah.
But it does exactly the same service, except that you get rid of the driver and then it would be just an employed. You still have to pay him, though. So I'm more skeptical in the city application.
Verena Butt-Despous, what's your religion on this?
Oh, religion is a bit of a strong word. I think we're all observing and projecting what we think might happen in the future with a lot of unknowns developing at the same time. What's happening for sure at a great scale, thanks to new technologies, is that we finally have sufficient information to optimize usage and to optimize assets and even to optimize our own time once we'll have autonomous vehicles, because we won't be driving them anymore. This is phenomenal. I think until now we were in a world, until recently we were in a world of imperfect information and where we had perhaps more abundant resources. Now that the resources are constrained, the fact that we have access to information, close to perfect information, thanks to connectivity, means that we are able to reduce all the inefficiencies in the usage of the car, in the way. So, for example, to be specific, a car now no longer needs to be empty because we know how to connect with people who are going in the same direction as the driver. And so we can fill up these empty seats. So we can finally get rid of this massive waste. The same thing goes to actually using our car when we don't need it. We can rent it out to a peer who might need it at a time where we don't. And if we apply this to many different things in society, this connectivity is really allowing us to optimize so much waste. And that's having a great impact on the economy, on the environment, but also on our lifestyle, and generating just more productivity. I mean, I would rather spend 3 hours reading a book or working than driving my car, for sure.
Cynics, though, would argue, Thierry Hans, that the reason Uber is working so hard at this driverless car isn't for safety reasons, isn't to allow us to read that book or take that nap. It's because they want to get rid of what critics call that bag of meat in the front seat, the driver they have to pay.
That's true. But I mean, the cost today is the human. It's not only for driving people; it's also for driving goods. I mean, for logistics, freight, etc. There is a lot of startup companies that are investigating the truck of tomorrow, the delivery, I would say, truck of tomorrow, etc. But one thing we didn't mention also is the access to the hub of transportation hub. The last mile is the first issue we have to face today for transportation.
So it's easy on the highway, but it's much harder, like you say, the last mile.
I mean, from a need view, from the point of view of the need for the people. Why do we need driverless cars? I mean, we also already mentioned for long distance, but we also need a vehicle to commute from home to maybe to the transportation hub, and that's what we call the last mile. So maybe the last kilometer, or the last 2-3 kilometers from your home to the nearest train station. This is one of the main issues today. The people, if you live in big city like London, Paris, or wherever, you have too many cars because the people they don't have an end-to-end transportation solution. They need to go to office. Maybe the train is one option, but you need to get to the train station first. That's why we need, I think, also driverless vehicle. But then, how to achieve driverless vehicle is one of the big issues.
Yeah, and when Verena was talking about how you'll have much better information with a driverless car, well, that information is computed by human beings. I mean, they're the ones who put the data in the system.
Well, the driverless car needs information itself to be able to drive around the place. It needs to have a map about the road. It needs to have, I would say, a plan, a trajectory. It needs to know what's the condition of the road. Is there obstacle? Is there too many traffic? Is there good driving situation, etc. So you need connectivity to get this information in the car. And it's not only the car to the cloud, but also the car with the other vehicles, with the roadside infrastructure.
So it'll do things like know if somebody's, like it'll be able to detect humans because they might have a cell phone in their pocket and that kind of thing?
That's part of the story, yes. You will not detect, but you will not detect the human with the cell phone. You might use a laser scanner or other technology that could detect pedestrians, cyclists, etc. The issue is not only to detect, but also to analyze and to decide if there is a risk or not. The fact that you have a human on the road, it doesn't mean there is a risk. It's only risky if this person wants to cross the road. And you need to analyze that carefully. So the laser, the vision, the camera, etc. are there also to assist this.
Michael Taney, this sounds daunting. Should we be afraid of the future? Are we losing control of the machine here?
No, absolutely not. I tell you, the base technology for all of this automated driving stuff has been on the road since 1999. We launched Delphi, the first automotive radar, in 1999. So since then, Delphi and other companies like us that sell to the automakers have been validating and perfecting these technologies. So already on the road today, many cars you can find that have what we call automatic emergency braking. So the driver, you'll be driving the car. If there's an obstacle in front of you or a car that's pulled in front of you and you're not stopping, it'll try to alert you. And if the driver doesn't react, then the car will brake automatically, or in the future steer automatically around an object. So that's we call that level 3 automation, and this level 1 through 5 zone. So this base technology exists, and it's just a matter of now taking it to the next level. So one of the things that we have invested in at Delphi is we've invested quite a bit in terms of this new automated driving software development. So Delphi bought a company called Automatica, also in Pittsburgh, has some of the same roots as the other situation you mentioned back to Carnegie Mellon. And so we bought 13 years worth of intellectual property around automated driving. This is taking vehicle sensors that exist on the car today, like radars, like vision systems or cameras. In the future, LiDARs are coming out, and integrating that information and then deciding where the car goes. Just like you think how you're driving, this car is now using software that thinks along those same lines, right? That in terms of looking out in front of the car, or around the car in a 360-degree type of a view, and then deciding what to do, just like you would do if you were driving the car, except it's faster. And when you combine it with technologies like vehicle-to-vehicle communication that can see around corners, you extend the range of what you can see or what your camera in your car can see, you know, from 200 meters to, you know, hundreds of kilometers to really know what's happening with the entire arrangement around the car. So this technology is really, the basics already exist. And that's what's really exciting, because now, because you have this technology that's right around the corner, now it completely creates this opportunity to disrupt the normal automotive market in terms of how people buy cars, what's the usage case. You know, we talked about the blah, blah car activity, but now think about the future of mobility on demand, okay, where you can where you can have a vehicle that maybe you own a part of, maybe it's a service, okay, that you can have a complete end-to-end solution. You call for the car on your mobile phone, the car, call it a robo-taxi, whatever label you want to put on it, that comes and picks you up and then drops you off, and all of the billing, the directions, the scheduling, all of these other items here are all taken care of by this overall service. It's exciting.
There was the 1980s cult Hollywood movie, Repo Man, where one of the lines was, the more you drive, the less intelligent you get. And now we're with what you're describing, taxi drivers no longer need to have what London cabbies call the knowledge anymore. But is that a good thing? I mean, leaving it all in the hands of a machine.
So let's tie it to safety for a minute. So there's 1.3 million people killed on roads around the world every year. That's a fatality every 30 seconds. It's a completely unacceptable situation. We have to do something about it. And quite frankly, drivers are the cause of over 90% of these accidents. So if we don't do something along this line of automation, even though I'm sure everybody at the table is a good driver, you know, you have to move to that next step where you give the driver, where the driver has the chance to react, but if they don't, the car can react for them. And that's the only way you really get to a future with zero accidents, zero fatalities, is to have some level of automation here. So yeah, I think it's a good thing, because it's really the only thing that's going to take you to that next step. Now, there's economic situations, clearly, that also are tied to this with this mobility on demand market, in terms of, again, how the vehicle ownership model may change for some. Consumers, you talked earlier about how people feel, what's their religion on this, but it certainly has captured the imagination.
Nicolas Meillan, of course, there's two caveats to this. One is, what will the driverless car do if there's the choice between running over the baby or or plowing into the shoppers on the sidewalk? It's a worst case scenario, but that's one of them. And then, of course, there's also the question, when you think about this idea of driverless cars, of what happens in this era where we're now talking about cyber espionage more and more, if, you know, the technology's hacked.
Yeah, I mean, many people have seen a video of a Tesla being hacked in China from people, I think, 10 kilometers from it. And it's one of the big, that's two big topics on which vehicle manufacturers and the industry is working on. The legislative aspect, who is in charge, who is to blame, who does what. And we've seen that with the first couple of issues on the autopilot from Tesla. Is it Tesla in charge? Was it the driver which was watching Harry Potter? You know, who was responsible? And then this issue of cybersecurity. It's clearly a big problem, because if your car is connected, it means it can be hacked, and people and vehicle manufacturers have to invest to make sure it does not happen. I think in the past I've seen a plane being hacked. It's a problem because you have a lot of people in this plane and you can't afford these kind of things. But I just wanted to come back to one point on this autonomous car, which I think is a great technology, etc. But I'm still one thing that I'm skeptical, especially in the city, because people say that's fantastic in the city, but people forget to think, what is the problem? We should start from the problem. What is the problem with the city? Pollution, that can be done with electric cars, and then congestion and parking. Why congestion? Because every day when you go to work, 90% of the people drive their car by themselves. They are alone in the car. Occupancy rate is 1.05. Okay.
1.05. That's the point
1.05
was making. Yeah.
On commuting. But that's to go and come back to work. If you put some cars which are robots, which means the occupancy rate would be 0. okay, this is going to decrease. It's not going to be good. A simple figure.
So we may have more cars on the roads.
You made more car. If you increase the occupancy from 1.05 to 1.2, you get rid of all traffic jams. Traffic jams have been in the city for more than 50 years. If you look at movies from the 1970s, Paris was already jammed. We never did anything.
It was worse.
Yeah, it was worse.
I was there.
The only thing is because those cars are filled with one person.
Yeah.
And so you were saying, is it the end of the car? I think we're going to the end of the individual car. But we don't have to wait. That's the good news. We don't have to wait for all the 6 million cars around Paris to be autonomous. We can do it today. We can do it with, of course, BlaBlaCar. We'll talk about it. But most importantly as well for those traffic jam is a company called WIBAUX, for example, which connects you with your colleagues. So you can go and come back to work to France 24 with your colleague if you don't take the bike, of course. That's something, once again, you increase this occupancy rate from 10%. What does it mean? It means, except of going with your colleague once a month to work, you go it once a week. So every week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, you go by yourself, and on Wednesday, either you stay at home or you go with your colleague.
All right. When France 24 covered the Paris Motor Show recently, our own James Andre found all the talk was not about driving, but about not driving. Ride-sharing services like BlaBlaCar. But sharing the ride is hardly the dream we've been sold. That is, if you've ever watched television. Most ads, like we could show you the new one for BMW, feature, it's usually a man, he's alone, either going up a mountain or through a desert. Verena, I'm going to put it to you bluntly here. How are you going to sell the French on sharing the ride?
Actually, as we've already pointed out, right?
The mood music here and everything.
Yes, well, that experience seems absolutely thrilling. Except, truth is, it's not that frequent that we have that kind of experience in the car.
Or that we own a BMW.
As well. Most of the time, the roads are packed, and I think that's part of the reasons why we're shifting from the ownership status, the status used to be really around owning a car and driving it alone, to being smart about the car. And now I think what's perceived in a way as cooler or smarter is to actually use the car in a way that meets your objectives better. And right now, if owning a car is pricey, and we know that if we take the example in France, a car costs approximately per year over 5,000 euros, and if you multiply that by the number of cars owned, it's approximately 10% of the GDP.
Everything you're saying makes complete sense.
Yeah.
My question is, it's the psyche of. I'm asking you to play sociologist here.
Yeah.
Young people are happy to do it because they don't have much money in their pocket. They want to save some money. They don't mind sharing a ride.
Yeah.
But the French like to be the king, because usually a man, alone in his vehicle.
You know, we're talking about 22 markets, right? So we're talking about also let's bring in all the Latinos
are the French
as well
reformable? Are the French reformable on this?
But the French and the 22 and the 40 millions of members we have in the 22 countries where we operate are, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that this, based on this, the illogical use today of the car that might have made sense in a previous life, but no longer does, because you spend your time in congestion, because it's pricey, and now suddenly you have the means to solve this problem. You have the means from from your phone, from your smartphone, from the tip of your fingers.
So that feel-good factor of you're saving the planet.
There is, in a second stage, I think people are happy to do something that on top of answering their need is actually good for the environment too. But first and foremost, it's agile, it's quick, it's cheap at the last minute. It means that you're free at the end of the day. You're free. You're not blocked. Ownership has become a sort of prison because it's costly, because it's not flexible. You need to park your car. There's no parking space. There's this, there's that. Whereas mobility solutions like BlaBlaCar just give you your freedom back. And I think that's what's cool about it, and that's what's more perhaps sexy than not being able to drive as you would like to this sexy car.
Michael Taney, what wins in the psyche of people? The sort of the Top Gear mentality, or what Verena's described?
Look, there's not just one straight answer, okay? Because you said something I completely agree with. It's not an everyday occurrence, okay? So when you have a car like that, you're not driving that way as your normal use profile. 100% of the time. Maybe it's 1 or 2%. You're out on that open road, there's no traffic, it's a fantastic weekend, and it's time to drive. So you'll have those areas, and there'll still be a demand for this, right? But the normal use case, when you get into these congested areas, there's still a market for these types of technologies, ride sharing or automated driving or mobility on demand, that are really other solutions beyond what, Nicholas, you talked about with respect to providing a solution that still addresses traffic, parking, emissions, fuel economy, et cetera, that is also facilitated by some of these technologies, not to mention the safety issues I talked about earlier. So there's still a place for getting behind that wheel and having a great time, but that's a small percentage of the use case.
And you have to...
But perhaps to add on that, I think going back to the distinction you made earlier on, Nicolas, on urban versus long distance. And actually, urban, there is probably less of a need for ownership. There's so many mobility alternatives, whether we're talking about taxi, Uber, on-demand solutions, the tube, whatever it is, name it. There are many alternatives, which means that you don't need to incur all the hassle of ownership today. But if you actually focus on the long distance segment where BlaBlaCar operates, our average distance on BlaBlaCar is 330 kilometers. Here, we're talking about people who don't have that many alternatives. In France, to go back to the French case, we've covered over 100,000 different routes. Obviously, these are routes that are not covered by in some cases are not covered by existing infrastructure, or not as well, or more expensive. And so that's where long distance is a different case for ownership. I think we'll see the shift not appear that fast, because it's still more practical to own your car if you go to A to B on.
I was going to say, Thierry Ernst, you're an engineer by training. You've probably thought long and hard about this. Do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years owning a car? Or will it be just something that you rent when you need to go for a long trip?
Honestly, when you live in a city like Paris, I think I don't need a car. There's a lot of options, and mobility on demand, etc. There's more and more solutions. So I think that it's a real question. Of course, if you want to go for the weekend, etc., if you need to bring your kids, luggage, etc., you need a car, but you may be able to just rent it when you need. The only question is probably when you want to rent a car, many other people want to rent a car. So you still need to have a lot of car available on Christmas, in summer, etc. Because that's a real issue. Renting it means that it's okay only if you rent when the other people don't need a car. Otherwise, you still have the same issue. But I think with the new solutions, and we didn't mention about shuttle, autonomous shuttle. I'm sure you are aware about Navia, EasyMile, that company that have a lot of test sites currently wherever. It's for short distance. That's what I called the last mile before. And those vehicles is a new alternative to transportation. That's not
very briefly. The concept is.
The concept is it's for very short distance to bring the people to the stations or back home, where you don't need to drive a car for 2 kilometers or 3 kilometers, especially with this parking issue. So the shuttle, I mean, there's an experiment in Paris. It's between the Gare d'Austerlitz and Gare de Lyon. It's a very short
train
distance.
Stations, yeah.
There is no options today. The taxi is too short. I mean, the distance is too short that no taxi driver will take you.
Yeah, and there's no subway link. There's no metro link between those two stations.
And on foot, maybe some people don't want to go on foot, and there's no bus. So that's a solution that fill up a gap.
Yeah, that's the second time that you've mentioned that in our conversation. Michael Taney, your reaction, because of this business of the last mile and the fact that cities just aren't equipped for driverless, we'll always have someone in the front seat for a long time to come, right?
Well, maybe not. You know, I understand your points. From our standpoint, one experiment that Delphi is doing right now is together with in Singapore with the local government, where we are actually setting up a demonstration. We're actually doing the work right now. It'll be live in 2019. It's like this end-to-end example I gave you. We'll have multiple cars rolling around initially with the driver in the front seat to take over if there's an issue. You call for the service on a phone, billing through the cloud.
But I mean, a city like Paris just isn't built for driverless cars.
But Singapore is also a dense city. So I think the complexity of the task, the technology is, we're already demonstrating driverless technology in urban, dense environments. So it's just a matter of time, I think, before we get to that point where it really rolls out.
Nicolas Meillan?
Yeah, I was something I wanted to mention on the autonomous car, which we haven't mentioned, is something very famous, which is called the rebound effect. What is the rebound effect? You mentioned that the objective of the autonomous car today is to get rid of the taxi and to put it unemployed. Good. So you get rid of 70% of the cost. But what do you do when you divide the cost by 3 times? You use it 3 times more. That's kind of a rule which happens. And that happened with Uber. A lot of people who use Uber today, they would use taxi much less, but because the service is good for the price, and they use it more. So I mentioned the problem was we had too many cars on the road. If you divide the cost by 3, we'd have 3 times more. Okay? And today nobody is thinking. So people say, yeah, but we will share it with everybody, etc. But we can do it today. We don't have to wait for the autonomous car. And I tried actually. You take Uber Pool, you shared it. I took it the other night, coming back to my place. I had to go around Paris and come back to my place. It took me an hour. It was horrible, honestly, and I would not do it again.
All right, so that is a dire prediction for 2017. The end of the traffic jam is not something we're going to see in the coming year. I want to thank Nicolas Meillon. I want to thank Verena Butt-Despous. I want to thank as well Thierry Ernst, Michael Taney. And it's bad luck to say, so I'll say happy end of year, is what we say here in France. And same to all of you. Thank you for joining us here.